I was there 3 years ago when people were excited by the announcement trailer for 1D&D and the prospect of updated rules and a new digital play space. Oh, but dang, Jeremy Crawford. Yeah, he just quit this month, and oh gosh, so did Chris Perkins. That's hard to believe, both of them gone. Oh, and that guy, Winninger. Yeah, he left right after the open gaming license stuff that followed all this. Huh, and him, Chris Ko, also gone. Yeah, he was sort of the head of this digital platform announced as part of 1D&D. Well, yeah, I guess that's what happened. Dungeons and Dragons, or I should really say Hasbro, had these huge plans, these huge goals in mind for digitizing and thereby monetizing the D&D experience like never before, and it failed pretty hard. In short, I think we can easily say that it's 'cause those goals from on high had less to do with making the game more fun and more to do with making it more expensive. But let's take a deeper look at how this digital dream became a nightmare, how it was overcome, and at what cost, and where D&D might go in the future, both as a brand and as a game. Because I'm Bob, this is where we learn how to have more fun playing RPGs together, and I invite you to think back, my friends. About 3 years ago, it was the summer of 2022. A simpler time. Dungeons and Dragons was still riding its peak popularity from record-breaking sales in 2020. They had just used some of that cash to officially acquire D&D Beyond, the original digital platform used and enjoyed by millions of players. And Stranger Things Season 4 was reigniting the mainstream hype for D&D. It truly felt like we were all running up that hill. Seriously though, this 1D&D announcement could not have come at a better time. It was still months before the open gaming license controversy, before sending literal Pinkerton thugs to repo magic cards from a small YouTuber, and zooming out further, this was still well before almost anybody was making AI-generated art and text with Midjourney or ChatGPT. So it was the before times, an innocent time when only the most icy-hearted grognard or fiery Pathfinder fanboy or, maybe any Magic the Gathering player, because they had their own scandals in the past. But it was before almost anybody in the D&D community felt contempt for Wizards of the Coast. And for one more timestamp, this was before it was feasible to run a YouTube channel where the entire subject is turning every D&D news drop into a scandal. Yes, the summer of 2022 was the last time that it felt like the D&D community was by and large unified and excited at the prospect of new D&D stuff. That first 1D&D playtest document came with proposed rules updates like the addition of level 1 feats for all characters, like all spells being organized into 3 lists for arcane, primal, and divine casting. They tried to add an entirely new race. Does anybody remember this? The Ardlings, angel/beast-like characters, and they tried to take away critical hits from Dungeon Masters. So sure, some proposed changes were embraced, others were shunned, but D&D happily shared that the first playtest survey received thousands and thousands more responses than ever before. At that time, it felt like the issues with the game were being addressed as much as they could be while maintaining compatibility with the current library of D&D 5e books. And that was most folks' chief concern, just being able to use their older books with the new stuff that they were excited for. Well, of course, the horn just stopped, but you might be able to see for the very first time the train that so often interrupts these videos. But speaking of books, there were rumblings of other concerns from the beginning, including that 1D&D would not even have physical books, that they would instead switch to entirely digital, web-based, and subscription-based content. Yeah, some people saw that 1D&D announcement trailer full of digital miniatures and maps and immediately felt things like this. I'm just concerned about how heavily they will monetize the minis. I already spend enough on physical ones and not looking forward to rebuilding at a similar price. Took them 6 minutes of fluff to avoid saying, "We want to make a boatload of money selling digital minis." Crying laughing face. If you own a digital copy of a book, you should have the digital minis of creatures in that book. But surely they were overreacting, right? Right? Winter 2022, and these cynical predictions were sadly validated when the president and CEO of Wizards of the Coast, Cynthia Williams, said D&D has never been more popular, and we have really great fans and engagement, but the brand is really under-monetized. Gotta get some scary music around that. In fact, that statement was pretty much the spark of the 24-hour D&D scandal news cycle. That statement was when Hasbro's digital dream started turning into everyone's digital nightmare. However, an important reminder, Cynthia Williams, who, well, you know, she's no longer with the company either, but she was totally right about D&D being under-monetized. Dungeons & Dragons is a world-renowned brand name, synonymous with fantasy gaming and a pioneer for gaming in general. It popularized the very idea of role-playing games and other ubiquitous gaming terms like hit points, experience points, levels, and more. It spawned monsters, worlds, inspired countless novels, movies, and video games that often make a lot more money than this thing that inspired them. So yeah, there is a disconnect here. People love digital gaming, people love D&D. It should be simple to bridge that gap, right? Right? Okay, some shade. Now, before we make some major revelations about the master plan to buy D&D Beyond, revoke the OGL, write a new edition, and create a more easily monetizable digital play experience through a 3D virtual tabletop known as Sigil? I still don't know. But before that, I think it's important to shine a light on 2 games that succeeded where Wizards could not. Now, I'm certain you've heard of the second example, we'll get to that in a minute, but this first one comes from an indie game studio that started because 2 dudes who had been playing RPGs together since the 90s were introduced to virtual tabletops when we all were around 2020. But they had the thought, hey, maybe we can make a digital TTRPG experience that's easier to use and more fun for everyone. Instead of the goal being, hey, maybe we can maximize shareholder value. Their game is called Tales of Fablecraft, and they are sponsoring this video. Gotta take that with a grain of salt, of course. But for a really basic comparison, where D&D's Sigil VTT was promised to run on all devices, but turns out can sort of run smoothly on a PC. Okay. The zoom on this camera is not good, and it's so weird to do this nature break right in the middle of a sponsor, but there are 5 deer. I think it's 5, might be 6. Yeah, and they're really just chilling. They're probably gonna move as soon as I move the camera back, but yeah, let's let them do their thing and I'm gonna do our thing. Okay. Oh, there's no way you heard that, but the mama just did as soon as I put the camera down, did the big snort, and then all the little babies ran. Get outside today after all this. So, we were saying how the Sigil VTT kinda works on PC, but Fablecraft, made by this indie game studio, works on PC, Mac, and coming next month to iPhone and Android later this year. So if you want to play it in person, you don't need a giant awkward laptop right in front of you, absolutely ruining the charisma of your live actual play event.
You're using physical dice?
No, I was doing that for practice.
But most importantly, Fablecraft is its own game. It's not just a VTT, and while they've worked with some D&D celebs, it's not just another D&D clone. I can't cover all the details in this little segment, but Fablecraft literally alters your digital dice to reflect your choices in character creation and advancement. And whether or not you like the sound of digital TTRPGs, That is a cool innovation, and it was made possible because instead of cramming a physical game into a digital tool, they started their design from scratch to embrace the technology it's built on. And it is free to download and play with a starter adventure that teaches you the game while you play. But speaking of crudely cramming a physical game into a digital tool, let's talk about this piece of junk called Baldur's Gate 3? Yeah, in case you've lived under a rock for the entirety of 2023, Baldur's Gate 3 is a video game released by Larian Studios and officially licensed through D&D and its parent companies, and it is extremely popular. I wonder why.
You know, darling, I think we're going to have a lot of fun together.
Nah, I don't want to sell short any of the accolades of this game. It received a perfect or nearly perfect score from basically every source that rates video games. It won multiple Game of the Year awards. And by just November 2024, it was estimated to have sold around 15 million copies. Like, this is the digital D&D experience that Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro have been thirsting for at this point. And lucky for them, these sales kind of saved their financial butts in 2023. We'll get to that in a minute. The question right now is, how did Larian Studios do it? Not just bridge this gap between D&D and video games, but produce a stellar video game in an industry that has become known for producing unfinished yet expensive garbage. Why don't I let the director of Larian Studios explain it? Here's a clip from his speech at one of those Game of the Year awards where he claims to have been told by an oracle which game will win next year, the year after that, and so forth.
The Oracle told me that the Game of the Year 2025 was going to be made by a studio who found the formula to make it up here on stage. Studio made their game because they wanted to make a game that they wanted to play themselves. They didn't make it to increase market share. They didn't make it to service a brand. They didn't have to meet arbitrary sales targets. And furthermore, the people in charge forbade them from cramming the game with anything whose only purpose was to increase revenue and didn't serve the game design. They were driven by idealism and wanted players to have fun. And they realized that if the developers didn't have fun, nobody was going to have any fun. That if they treated their developers and players well, those same developers and players would forgive them when things didn't go as planned. But above all, they cared about their game because they loved games. It's really that simple, said the Oracle.
Now, to properly expose the machinations behind 1D&D, we must drill into its three main parts: the digital play experience, the 2024 core rulebooks, and first, buying D&D Beyond. To be frank, these points I'm about to summarize mostly come from Roll for Combat and various RPG news sites who deduced this weirdly conspiratorial chain of events by talking firsthand to people involved. Basically, back in 2020, the incredible sales of D&D and the somewhat forced shift to online play made the suits at Hasbro say, guys, what the actual frick, all those dollars, I mean people, are going to D&D Beyond, but we don't own D&D Beyond? We're D&D, make them an offer immediately. So Wizards makes them an offer, but D&D Beyond is like, no thanks, we're good. Because their previous agreement was generous. The only thing D&D Beyond had to worry about was when Wizards would eventually decide to publish a new edition. So the suits decided it's time to publish that new edition. Yeah, buying D&D Beyond and creating the 2024 core rulebooks go hand in hand. There was just one more problem with this plan. Anybody could come along and make their own competitor digital D&D platform because of that pesky open game license. This created bad press in mainstream news, which hurt the D&D movie's box office performance a few months later, so Hasbro sold the movie studio at a $3.5 billion loss, and you know the suits must have been kissing the feet of Larian Studios when Deus Ex Baldur's Gate 3 blew everyone away and made an estimated $2 billion, saving Hasbro's financial butt. Now you might be thinking, okay, but what does any of this have to do with D&D's Sigil 3D virtual tabletop? Exactly. It doesn't fit. Having briefly chatted with the lead developers and gotten a demo a couple years ago, I learned that the VTT was a passion project for a couple of these dudes who for years had wanted to make a more fun digital D&D experience. But as we've discussed, fun alone does not necessarily increase shareholder value, so they only got the green light around 2020 when it was already too late. The 5-year plan for 1D&D was outdated the minute everyone could go outside again, and as you can guess, burning $1 billion and years of community goodwill in the process certainly didn't help. So let's review. The D&D digital play experience is a bust. Buying D&D Beyond was a good decision, but it would be nice if it worked better. See this great video from Mystic Arts. And third, the people who bought the 2024 core rulebooks seem to love them. But with Hasbro not mentioning D&D sales in its last earning report, we can assume that didn't go quite as planned either. Now, after all that doom and gloom, I should sound like a totally mad lad when I tell you this might have been the greatest possible outcome for the future of Dungeons & Dragons as a fun tabletop game. Think about it. 6 months ago, we had Hasbro CEO Chris Cox being super jazzed about shoving artificial intelligence into D&D, saying, "We will deploy it significantly and liberally." If you look at a typical D&D player, I play with probably 30 to 40 people regularly. There's not a single person who doesn't use AI somehow. That's a clear signal. We need to be embracing it. Still dying to know how he plays with 30 to 40 people regularly. But now, after 1D&D's monetary failure, as in game good, but money small, the suits don't care anymore. Sure, we will continue to see strange branding collaborations like those D&D slot machines, the Baldur's Gate tie-ins will definitely keep coming, and perhaps even that D&D Go mobile game prophesied by Professor DM. But it seems to me like now that there's no more pressure to twist the tabletop game of D&D into something it's not, maybe we can go back to 2014 to 2019 vibes of aiming for fun instead of digital monetization. But now, I leave this prediction to you. Drop it in the comments. How many years do you think we have until this mostly new design team, under less pressure from Hasbro, writes an actually new edition of Dungeons & Dragons? Then I encourage you to check out this cool video on your screen, or consider joining my Patreon through the links below, like these fine folks who directly support what I do. Thank you, and keep building.